I'm Nicole Rachat with Investing News Network, and we're here at day 2 of the Minds and Money Conference in Toronto, and I'm with Brian Leni of the Junior Stock Review. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
And how's the conference been so far?
Oh, it's been great. Saw some really good presentations yesterday. Battery metals are a big topic, and I'm very interested.
Great. So you recently wrote a report on nickel laterites, and you mentioned that there's going to be a nickel boom. Can you just describe a little bit about why you think there's going to be a boom and why it's a good time to invest in nickel?
Sure. So the nickel market's interesting. Right now, 2/3 of the demand goes into stainless steel, and that's primarily fed by nickel laterites. And over the next few years, there's potentially a big push for electric vehicles, primarily driven by batteries. And it should be interesting to see, the uptake of the electric vehicles, and potentially, Glencore came out with a 30% projection on adoption rate by 2030. If that were to happen, that would represent around 1 million plus tons of nickel demand. And really, when you look at the current supply-demand fundamentals, you kind of wonder where it's going to come from. What's interesting is, although most of the narrative surrounding the battery market goes around nickel sulfides, I believe the future is probably in nickel laterites. They're more abundant, they're open pitable mined, and there's a potential for HPAL to process these things at reasonable cost. The price does need to go up from where it is today, but I think that's where the future is.
And my next question was actually circling back to the laterites. Where do you see that going in 2019, and how will it affect the nickel sector?
It'll be interesting to see. I think when you talk about nickel laterites, especially if you're looking over the next year, Indonesia and the Philippines are the two largest producers of nickel laterite in the world. And Indonesia in particular has a presidential election coming up next year. So it should be interesting to see how that ends up affecting the market, because over the last 4 years, it has had a tremendous effect. So time will tell.
Okay. And do you have any advice for someone that would like to invest in nickel right now?
Look, you can be picky. For me, there's one investment vehicle or one nickel company that I own. That's FPX Nickel. They've got a clear path to improvement on their existing PEA, which I believe is going to be economic, probably around $7. That's speculation, but I think there's a realistic reasons why that is. So that's the company I'm investing in. But be picky, and yeah.
Now, what's one of the major factors that affected the price of nickel in the last quarter and might be affecting in 2019?
Sure. So the 4 years preceding 2016, we were in surplus nickel, and that's really what affected the nickel price to the negative. It reached a low around $350 per pound. The coming off that bottom is really what's given some bounce to the nickel price, and really it's what you see coming off bottoms. And again, the other side was Indonesia and the Philippines came out with some environmental and sort of protectionist type of policy, where they required anybody exporting nickel laterite ore from Indonesia or Philippines had to actually put secondary refinement in the country for jobs. And that definitely affected supply and thus boosted the price.
Okay. Now moving on to some other resources. What do you think was a great resource in 2018 that might have been slightly overlooked?
Well, it's interesting. I think zinc has some great fundamentals, and the price has really come down with the tariff talk, and I think sort of some concerns over supply. But I think the fundamentals look great still for zinc. And right now, those zinc projects that were, all the rage in the year previous are on sale. And some of them show some very good value, net present value and IRR. So, I think you can go out right now and get a good deal. And I think, while it won't stay there, I think you might see $2 zinc in the next year or so. And, that'll be a good push for that market.
And what do you think is pushing zinc along? Why do you think it might reach that price?
It's supply constraints. The fact is, the supply chain of developed zinc projects just isn't there. And interesting, that flows in with lead and silver. The three are usually found together, and they're just not developing these deposits as quickly as the demand kind of shows right now. So. Yeah.
Okay, and this is going to be my final question, but just as a general sense, how do you see the resource sector shaping up in 2019?
I'm cautiously optimistic. I think 2018 was maybe a little worse than I thought it was going to be, but that makes me excited for next year. And when you search for value, these are the best times. And it's hard to find value in bull markets, so you got to take advantage of it while the sale is on. So.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, I'm Nicole Rachat with the Investing News Network at Day 2 of the Minds and Money Conference in Toronto.